I just look at it as in that, when we have viruses, or we have opportunity for viruses, that there may be small viruses that start, and then they may only like last for a very short time before they die off, and then there's a modification or an adaptation that happens. And when you have these cesspools, when you have this crock pot of ideals or building blocks that has a potential of turning into something, at some point in time, that's going to happen. It's kind of like playing bingo. You have all of the numbers and letters within this machine that kind of pops up and down. All of a sudden, both the number you're looking for pops out. So when you ask why now, it's because we're at an all-time high for the population. You have a massive market that requires a massive amount of food. So you have all of these extra animals that are being slaughtered. So there's going to be more blood. There's going to be more chances. There's going to be more building blocks for something to happen. And it was only a matter of time before this happened. We've been notified back in 2002 and 2003 when SARS COVID-1 emerged, which was MERS, which was a Middle Eastern respiratory, and SARS, which was sudden acute respiratory syndrome. When those emerged back when they were coronavirus 1 in the early 2000s, epidemiologists and biologists were telling us, listen, coronavirus is something, and it's only a matter of time before these mutate into something. And I think what happened now, unfortunately, is that today is a time. So the precursor or the earlier versions of the coronavirus, COVID-19, already started back in 2002, 2003, and we were warned of it then. So we knew it was going to happen. Now, whether or not there may have been a exposure from a lab, who knows? But to completely write off the fact that coronavirus just happened to happen now is bizarre. It's not. We were told about it 18 years ago. We knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when.
Okay, so if I accept that, then I have to also blame the government for not being prepared. Because if that happened 18 or 12 years ago, whatever you said, then there was plenty time for the government to be prepared for this pandemic that was predicted to happen. Now the government is
Mm-hmm.
always prepared with guns and warplanes and tanks and whatnot for an unexpected outbreak of war. Why wouldn't they be prepared for an expected outbreak of a pandemic?
Governments, for the most part, underneath their public health division, they have public health officers and officials that actually prepare. Like every government has a pandemic plan. And a pandemic plan has been around since the early 50s, because the origins of a pandemic plan would have came during the Spanish flu back in the early 1900s. So governments knew that there's always potential for disease. Now, I think kind of what happens over time. I have no idea how government works. I have some friends who work in government, so this is kind of based off what I've heard them say. Is that over time you kind of get peaks and lows where it's like there's a long period of time where like nothing happens for 10 or 15 years, and then the pandemic plan sits there and nobody pulls it out and blows the dust off it, because it's just something that kind of happened. So in 2003, MERS happened, SARS happened, the pandemic plans came out. Everybody was prepared for 2004, 2005, 2006. Things kind of tapered off. Then in 2009, H1N1 came along, swine flu. And everybody was like, oh shit, we're underprepared for this again. So we were in the same situation where masks weren't available and PPE wasn't available and hand sanitizers weren't available and vaccines weren't available and the resources weren't available, plans weren't up to date. And then there was a massive push from like 2009 to 2012. For those 3 years, all of these health agencies and authorities and governments had these warehouses full of PPE. But what happens is PPE has an expiration date. And then 5 years after the fact that you buy it, it's no good anymore. Then 2015 rolls around, then we got the new version of H1N1, which is H1N5. And that shit kicks back up the place again. And all of a sudden it's like, whoops, big pandemic. Let's start moving again. So everybody buys everything back up again, buys all the supplies, reignites the pandemic plan. Then 4 or 5 years, 6 years goes by, and now we're in 2020. Well, actually, COVID-19 started in 2019, hence the 19 behind it. But now that started, and it turned out to be such a infectious respiratory illness, that we're back to the same situation again. So it's like humans don't learn. It's not the government; it's humans don't learn, right? Like it's a fact that we know these things are going to happen. These threats are there. We understand that we need to have PPE and stuff available. But what happens is that we live in such a clickbait culture that we have a short-term memory that if it's not the next biggest, best, greatest thing, then we forget about what happened yesterday, and it's not important anymore. If it's not in the headlines, it's not in the news, it's not important. Then it's not important anymore. And the thing with government is that government is elected by the citizens and the people who vote them into place. And if the narrative behind the citizens is to say we need pandemic plans, we need this, we need that, that's not something that we ever hear of. Although we know it's a risk, it's not something we actually protest for, right? So the fact that to say it's the government's responsibility, no, it's not. I think it's human error and the fact we have a short-term memory, and that's basically what it is.
Okay, well, I have a response to that. May I?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, well, firstly, it is. I'll open up by saying it's 100% the government's responsibility, and I just want to allude back to what you said, where you said the PPE, which they had for earlier threats, you said they expire, right? So they did have enough in storage, but they expire. Okay, so it's government's job in that case to ensure that all the PPE equipment is valid, okay, is safe, is not expired.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the government's job to do that. If the PPE equipment expires, then what they've got to do is they've got to reorder new ones that don't expire, and as you say, they didn't do that. And it's totally government's fault for not doing that. When the life of a plane, a jet, a fighter, a ship, something like that comes to an end, they order another one. When a helicopter's usefulness is done, they order another one. When the PPE expires with the masks or the hand sanitizer or whatever, they don't order anymore. That is the fault of people in government, but ultimately it's government's fault, and that's my argument.
Yeah, I mean, if you're comparing military units to PPE, you're comparing apples to oranges, because the PPE that's used or that's stored in these rooms are not being used. It's not something that's being used every single day. When you're talking about military equipment that has a useful life and has a retirement plan, because you need to maintain a certain force. So as something retires, something needs to be there to replace that immediately. There can't be a gap between the two, because that weakens our defense system from a military standpoint. I get what you're saying, but to compare that to like why the government doesn't hold that same model towards PPE is comparing apples to oranges.
No, it's not, I don't think it is. I'll tell you why. Because both the military hardware, which we need, even if we're not using it, and PPE are essential to be available when needed. Right. So, if the PPE is just allowed to expire and a pandemic hits, then we're not ready. If the military is allowed to degrade and China. China attacks and we're not ready, China wins. So I think that government is fully responsible.
But see, now we're talking about global government in terms of that.
No, I'm talking about the United States or any country really, but United States. I mean, let's just use the United States.
No. I mean, every government was at fault because not one government was prepared anywhere at all for COVID-19. So the entire world,
but the United States is faultless, aren't they? They're the ones who lead the world. Put it this way: you can't trust what China says. You can't trust what Putin says. But when America says it, you got to trust it.
It's not the United States' responsibility as a singular country to like govern the entire world. I mean, that breaches each individual.
But no one's suggesting
sovereignty.
No one's suggesting that they govern the entire world.
Well, if you're saying that the U.S. weren't prepared and it's their fault where we're at today, that's again another incorrect statement, because COVID-19 didn't have any boundaries. It didn't pick a culture. It didn't pick a country. it affected everyone equally. And the fact that,
No, it
yes, it
didn't.
did.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it
It
did.
affects the 50% of all the deaths are
Okay,
due to
that's not
COVID
what I'm saying.
are
That's not
either
what I'm saying.
older people or people
That's,
who have
that's not what I'm saying.
compromised immunity.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that COVID-19 has a potential to affect everyone in terms of their nationality, their sovereignty, their their
That
race,
that
their religion, their
that's
creed.
exactly what I said. If people who are over 60, they're over 60. Whether you're black or white or Chinese, you're still over 60. So it makes no what you're saying makes no sense. To even bring race into it makes no sense.
No, it's
If it
because
attacks people who are over 60, old, who
it's
have
because you
who
took it out of
perhaps have,
context,
hold on a
man.
second, who perhaps have a compromised immunity, and those who are younger
That's not
that
what we're
have a
talking about.
compromised immunity. That's who it attacks.
That's not
That's who
what we're
gets it
talking about.
first. What are you talking
That's
about
not.
then?
I said it affects everyone equally, and you said no, it doesn't. It
Exactly. I
only
stand by
affects.
that. Healthy people don't succumb to it so easily.
That's not what
Healthy
we're
young
talking about,
people.
my guy. That's not what we're talking about. What I
Then
okay, let's okay. Look, we're arguing semantics. We're not going to get anywhere in this conversation. Let's keep the conversation moving forward.
go for it.
The
Okay.
point that I'm making is that your argument was that government is government's fault, and I said that every government in the entire world failed miserably. Not one person was prepared for it. So to say it's government's fault, no, it's humanity's fault that we have. My argument is we have such a short-term memory that when these events happen, they go in the past and they're not relevant anymore. Military threat is something that's always there all the time. That's always in the news. It's always in the narrative. That's always moving forward. So that's front and foremost is military, war. That's all we see. So it only makes sense that we invest a lot of money into that. We don't see like moving forward. I can guarantee you once we get past COVID-19, there will be a massive public health initiative moving forward because this affected every single person on the entire planet, no matter what country, no matter what group, age, or color, skin, race, whatever it is. It fucking put the whole world in its tracks and slowed everything down. So moving forward, hopefully we will learn from this and have a good public health and have a global pandemic plan, not a not a not like a US pandemic plan or Australia or England, or we'll have a global pandemic plan and a global pandemic response to
Well,
mitigate this from happening moving forward.
that's what the World Health Organization is for. Was supposed to be for. They failed miserably, and that's why Trump said "fuck you" and out he went.
Sure, okay, fine. But what
But
I'm
I agree
saying
with
is
you.
that
I agree with you. Let's just move on.
sure, okay, yeah. I mean, like, it comes down to humanity. Like at this point, it's not pointing fingers. Is that we fucked up as a species, and from an evolutionary standpoint, we need to mitigate this risk moving forward. Because if not, we're going to fucking exterminate ourselves off this planet. We got to have these plans in place. We have to have these mitigations in place. And
I
if we
would have
don't, we
loved to
fucked.
have been
And
around in 1962 during the Russian standoff and I would have loved to have I would have loved to have had Twitter, Google Hangouts going at that time, so I could have monitored, or we could have all spoken about what was happening with the Cuban crisis and how it's the end of the world, and we're going to extinct ourselves. We're going to cause ourselves to become extinct, like sooner than we think, and blah 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 blah. End of the world, Armageddon, and then things passed for 10, 20, 30 years. Now we're back to the same thing again. It's I think it's a lot of fear mongering.
it is. But why is that there in the first place? It's for control, and
For
who's trying to
control,
get the
yeah, yeah.
control?
Well,
That
absolutely.
that's where the question is. Hang on a second. I'll be right back. Hold on. I'm busting for a piss. Give me a second. How would you explain life?
How would I explain life to who?
Like, yeah, I mean, like the origins of life. So, like from a science. So, if you're an atheist, then you probably follow the scientific method, right? Like you would follow modern science or evolution,
Well, yes, yes, yes. But let
right?
me get an idea of where you're coming from. What?
Yeah, no, I'm just asking a question
No,
because
that's fine. Yes,
I'm
I'm an
curious.
atheist, and yes, yes, yes to all your questions. But are you asking me from the point of view of another atheist, or where do you sit in the spectrum? Are
Um,
you a are you a theist or an atheist? Basically, is my
I
question.
would say I would say I'm an atheist.
Oh, all right.
All right. So what I'm asking is that we understand that the theory of biogenesis is that life has to come from life, right?
No, no, no,
Abiogenesis,
no,
in our
no,
case,
no,
like
no, no, no. That's too broad a brushstroke that you're painting there.
no, it's not at all actually. Like you can look up the theory of biogenesis and
Well,
see
it
that
doesn't
that
matter. I mean, life came the way it came, aside from what anybody else really thinks or wants
no,
it to
no. I
be.
mean, like from the science, like like I come from the scientific community as an atheist, and I'm sure you do as well. What
Of
I'm saying
course.
is that from a scientific community, we haven't been able to observe spontaneous life. There has been no incident ever recorded that where life just happened for the sake of life happening. The theory of biogenesis is that in order to have life, like a single cell organism can multiply into a double cell organism or can create another single cell organism, but life can only be created from life. So the question is, where did life originate from? And that's not me saying that can you like I'm not putting you in a hot seat as an atheist, because that's the question that we all ask ourselves.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to answer. I don't see
Right.
what's so difficult
So
about that question.
right. So where did life? So from your atheistic point of view, from your worldview, where do you think life originated from?
Okay, well, if you let me answer, I'll see if I can see what I can do here.
Sure.
Um, let's start from the beginning of this universe, which is not the beginning of existence. It's just the beginning of this universe.
Mm-hmm.
What do they say? 14.5 billion years ago, give or take, whatever.
Sure.
Let's say 4.5 billion years ago. So in in 10 in 10 billion of those 14.5 billion years, 10 billion. Think about 10 billion. There's no Milky Way. There's no Earth. There's no solar system. Right? 10 billion. After 10 billion years, when the impact of the Big Bang, the force, after that sort of kind of what do they say, sort of um, neutral equalized, okay, then the Earth was stable enough not to be bashed around and thrown into different orbits, and found its orbit around the sun. And it was obviously not the same temperature as it is now. It was vastly different, and that was 4.5 billion years ago. Okay, so it's taken the 10 billion years since the beginning of the universe, then another 4 billion years since the Earth stabilized its orbit around the sun, and then a little bit before now. I can't really say on the scale, but um, let's say 1 million years ago, life emerged out of all that. It doesn't seem to me very peculiar that life would emerge, if it could emerge, because we know what the building blocks of life are, and the building blocks of life are not things that are alive. Like an amino acid is not something that's living, for example. So it doesn't seem to me beyond the realm of believability that a life, a chemical life, would emerge after all this time, at some point, given all this time, at some point when the conditions are just right, and it just you're given enough time, anything can happen, right? So the conditions were just right, and bang, the chemistry took place, which was the spark of the first, I don't know, cell or whatever the first form of life was. That's my answer.
Right. And cool. I get it. But there's one common area, or there's one commonality that you have with the idea of God, is that you're taking faith in that belief system to say that, well, I would assume that within that 1 million years that the chances of that happening would have happened. But the thing is that we haven't been able to witness or verify that since since we've existed as humans. There's been no other example ever recorded.
There might not be, but give me a better explanation than the one I gave you.
No, I don't have one. That's why I'm asking you. I said, so.
Well, there you
Like,
go.
what
I
do you
mean,
think?
there you, look.
Right?
I
So,
don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not a million years old, but
right.
it
But
just
would you
seems
agree
that,
this?
you talk about evolution, yet you discount evolution in the emergence of life out of the universe. Come on,
In my
it's evolution.
in my understanding of it is that okay, so even if we talk about the Big Bang, right? That, like that you said, that the Big Bang theory happened. So in order for the Big Bang theory to happen, there would have to have been potential for that Big Bang theory to happen.
Correct.
So that's kind of cause and effect, right? In order for something to happen,
Of course, of course. Like I said,
So where does that potential come from? So in order for there to be
I told,
potential for something to happen,
I told you. You
right?
weren't listening.
I was listening, but
Okay, I
guess
said,
you weren't clear.
when the universe began, it wasn't the beginning of any. It was just another. It wasn't existence beginning. It was just the universe appearing on the timeline of existence, which is infinite. In other words, no beginning and no end. So,
Right, right. But let's take that theory between, in order for something to exist, there would have had to have been potential for that thing to exist. So if we talk about existence within itself as an individual or as a singularity,
no,
then the
no, I'm
fact
not
that
talking about existence as a singularity. I'm talking about existence as opposed to existence as a
non-existence,
permanent state, as opposed to the possibility of a non-existence. There's no
right?
possibility of a non-existence. So
But in order for things to
existence
exist,
is the only state that's possible. That's what I
in
mean by
order for things
existence.
to exist,
That hold on a sec. I just want you to hear what I said. That's what I mean by existence. There's no before existence, because existence is infinite.
well, then that disproves your agreement with me to say that in order for something to exist, there would have to have been potential for that thing to exist. So
Yeah,
now we get into
yeah,
the
but
chicken and
no,
the
the
egg theory.
potential for existence to exist is the impossibility of non-existence to quote unquote exist.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
It,
Sorry.
it's the only possible state. Existence is the only possible state. There's no other state possible. So once you understand that existence as the only possible state is an infinite concept, an infinite idea, then you'll
Right,
understand
but
that there's no beginning to existence. There's no end to existence. The
so
universe
that means
might
that
come,
God.
the
So
universe
that means
might go, the multiverse might this and that and the other, whatever. But existence itself, the existence of energy,
so existence is the originator.
the existence of energy is infinite.
So so existence, the fact that existence exists means that it's the point in time or the origin of the beginning of the possibility for me to exist.
What? I didn't get that.
Okay, so so the fact that there's potential for things to exist. So the fact that existence is something, we, we could say that existence is the originator of the potential. It was the origin. So the fact that things exist gave me the potential to exist or to be a part of it. I'm a byproduct of whatever it is that's happening.
Everything is.
But
If that's the case,
right,
you're no special than a rock at this point. With that deduction, but you're right. You're just part of the universe.
I'm a part of the universe, right?
And life and the existence or uh, um, the appearance of life is just another step in the evolutionary trail. After 14.5 billion years of just sort of letting science and physics and chemistry do its thing, and lo and behold, here we are.
Right. So, like, what I'm going back to is the fact that you said that existence has to be, because without it, then obviously we wouldn't exist.
No, existence has to be because you, you cannot have a state of non-existence. Can you explain to me how a state of non-existence would look, and how would we know that it's there?
Well, we wouldn't, obviously, because you have that contrast, right? So you can't have one without the other.
Well, you no, there is no other. That's my point.
Well, things either exist or they do not exist. So what's the alternative
No,
if things do
no,
not
I'm
exist?
not talking about things. I'm talking about energy. The amount of energy that's available in this universe is finite. That's the amount of energy that was pushed into this universe when it began. Okay, so it's finite. Um, where it came from is a place which obviously was finite. Was a force that this universe is a reaction to, and so on, going back and going forward. So existence on its own is the only state possible. There is no possible state of non-existence, just as there is no state of the supernatural.